What is good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode brought to you by the League FFB. Today, we're going to be going through the Week 5 top 10 waiver wire pickups for your fantasy football leagues and give you guys some other players that you should be double checking those waiver wires for, just in case you're in a little bit of a smaller league, or maybe you have a league where some of these guys snuck through the waiver wire. But I'm going to give you a list of a ton of players today, so make sure you guys are subscribed to this channel. You don't want to miss any of the future content that's coming to this channel. But with that being said, let's hop right into today's video and let's start talking about these waiver wire pickups. All right, so as you can see, I got these double check players for you. These are going to be the priority targets. If for some reason, like I said, you're in a smaller league or these players have snuck through, I would be prioritizing them. All of these players are between that like 50% and 75% ownership. That's going to be Chris Godwin, Hunter Henry, Justin Fields, Dallas Goedert, Wan'Dale Robinson, who I would definitely be prioritizing here this week, Harold Fannin, Bashal Tutin, Brandon Ayuk, Alec Iamaner, who we've talked about to a very, very long extent, and Kareem Hunt as well. So those would be the players that I am double checking. But the first player I really want to talk about is going to be Woody Marks, and we've talked about him as a stash candidate. I think he's even, snuck his way into a couple of these waiver wire episodes as a back end player that just, you just want to be holding on to him. And really, he came out this week in a win against the Tennessee Titans, rostered in about 37% of leagues, and goes out and has a 2-touchdown game, has 21 touches, 119 total yards, and he played on 59% of the snaps. His 21 touches were more than Nick Chubb's total of 15 touches, so it does feel like the takeover that had been imminent for Nick Chubb has finally happened, and Woody Marks is now the 1A in this backfield. At least that's the way I'm operating moving forward. So Woody Marks is definitely the number one pickup here this week. He shouldn't have been available in 37% of leagues, but for some reason he was, and now he's going to be the number one pickup here going into week 5. So let's go to my number 2 guy. It's going to be Kenneth Gainwell for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And now look, he's going on to a bye in week 5, so you're picking him up, and he's not going to be able to be played next week, but he had 134 total yards, 2 touchdowns, 25 touches in this game against the Minnesota Vikings over there in Dublin, Ireland. He's rostered in about 43% of leagues, and yes, this was because Jaylen Warren was not in the game. However, we don't have any real clarity on what Jaylen Warren's knee injury is as of right now. I don't expect him to miss week 6, but it's very clear to me that Kenneth Gainwell is going to be the bell cow of this offense if Warren misses time, and he's clearly the handcuff option over a guy like Caleb Johnson, who they drafted. So I definitely would be picking up Kenneth Gainwell. I think he's worth picking up and putting on the back end of your bench, just in case you need some running back production, maybe later in the year. My next guy is going to be Jaxson Dart, the rookie quarterback for the New York Giants. Went out there this week, beat the Los Angeles Chargers in a 21-18 victory, had 111 passing yards, 1 passing touchdown, and 1 rushing touchdown. But the rushing upside was very apparent to me. 10 carries, 54 rushing yards. Like I said, the rushing touchdown there. This is a player we should be picking up. And at that 35% roster percentage, I think he is a player who has the ability to, if he can get through this tough schedule, obviously he just lost Malik Neighbors, but if he's going to be using his legs like that, he's going to be a player that in super flex formats, you're going to be able to plug him into your lineup. And in 1QB leagues, he's still going to be able to be streamed if you need some quarterback play. So make sure you add him. And an interesting stat that I found per CBS is he's the only quarterback in history to win his first career game versus a team that was 3-0 or better. So just a good start for Jaxson Dart. Obviously, the stats don't look, outstanding, but he still played pretty well. And the fact that he went in and beat those Chargers, I don't think any of us really expected that to happen. So the next guy for me is going to be Kendre Miller of the New Orleans Saints. Running back, obviously, went out there this week, lost to the Buffalo Bills, only rostered in about 7% of leagues, had 65 total yards, 1 touchdown on 11 touches. And I think this is a player that we just need to be picking up at this point in time. We've seen his snap rate increase weekly, and he is on the field for a ton of red zone opportunities and a ton of red zone plays. And I think this is a player who could be a very sneaky add in this offense, just in case New Orleans decides that they do want to trade away Alvin Kamara in that contract over the next couple of months. If they decide they're playing for the future and Kamara is just no longer part of the plans. We've heard some rumblings about that before in the past, but if they do decide to do it this year, because Kendre Miller is showing up a little bit better than he has in years past, I think Kendre Miller is certainly a stash-worthy bench player. Let's talk about a wide receiver, because I think Romeo Doubs is certainly worth picking up as well. Right now, only rostered in about 45% of leagues. We've talked about him on the stash episodes and the waiver episodes over the last couple of weeks as well, since the Jayden Reed injury. But he goes out this week, 6 for 8 for 58 total yards and 3 touchdowns in this game against the Dallas Cowboys. Now, obviously 3 touchdowns isn't going to be the norm for him, and he is going into a bye week here in week 5, so you're going to be adding him to look at him as a potential week 6 and beyond play. But to me, me, he looks like Green Bay's wide receiver one, at least the red zone target that Jordan Love is looking at this point in time. So he's a player in a good offense, seeing enough usage, seeing the touchdown upside. I just want to pick him up and add him if I need some flex wide receiver production, and Romeo Doubs feels like a very safe bet for that moving forward. Another wide receiver we can talk about is Darius Slayton of the New York Giants. Obviously, with Malik Neighbors going down, somebody has to step up, and we do think that Wan'Dale Robinson, who is rostered in over 50% of leagues, is going to be the first person to step up, but Darius Slayton's going to be another guy here who's going to have to step up as well. He's only rostered in about 5% of leagues at the moment, went 3 for 4 for 44 yards here in this game. He should fill in the outside type of wide receiver role now that Malik Neighbors is done for the season. And if you're looking for a big play guy, just any type of, signs of life on the waiver wire, Darius Slayton is a player that can do that for you. Another player is going to be Brenton, the tight end for the Jacksonville Jaguars. He's very interesting at 33% rostership percentage right now, 6 for 7 this week with 45 total yards. And through the first month of the season, he has more receptions and receiving yards than both Travis Hunter and Bryant Thomas Jr. do individually for this offense. He's also a top 5 tight end in yards per route run, only behind guys like Dalton Kincaid, Tyler Warren, Brock Bowers, and Jake Ferguson. So Brenton Strange, even though we haven't had the big game, he hasn't gotten into the end zone, I think this is a player who's very interesting, given the role that he has currently in this Liam Cohen offense. Another player we should talk about as well is going to be Ollie Gordon. Now, he hasn't played at the time of this recording, but he's rostered in about 44% of leagues. We talked about him in last week's waiver wire episode. I do think he's a player that should be above that 50% threshold, and he is the clear handcuff to me to Devon Achane. He's worked above Jalen Wright. He's just better than Jalen Wright. It's just shown up on the football field so far through the preseason and the regular season. And if anything were to ever happen to Devon Achane, I think Ollie Gordon would be the guy that's going to be the next guy up. So he's a player that I'm going to be looking at. And even if, there is no Achane injury ever, hopefully there's not, because a lot of us are very big Achane fans and he's a big piece of fantasy football. But even if nothing does happen, I do think Ollie Gordon has a pretty established role in this offense already. And we saw that in last week's matchup against the Buffalo Bills. So it's going to be interesting to see how he does against the Jets, knowing that I'm recording this beforehand. One more player we should talk about is going to be Tyjae Spears of the Tennessee Titans. He hasn't played at all this year. He's rostered in about 35% of leagues, and like I said, they just got stomped by the Houston Texans 0-26. If you saw Cam Ward's statement, he said, to keep it a buck, we're playing like ass, and that is exactly what the Tennessee Titans have done. That said, Tyjae Spears is going to be coming off of IR here in the next couple of weeks, maybe 1 to 2 weeks. I think he'll be in the lineup again for the Tennessee Titans, and maybe this is just an offense that needs a little bit of juice. It's not the best situation for Tyjae Spears to come back into because they're not scoring touchdowns. They're not really moving the football that well. But if Tyjae Spears can come in and kind of give them a little bit of extra juice, maybe he's worth picking up and putting on the back end of your bench. Running backs are hard to come by. If you can find a guy like Spears, maybe he's worth the roster spot. And if nothing happens, the first couple of weeks that he's back in the lineup, we can drop him again because the offense just isn't good. So let's go to one more guy. This is certainly just a stash. I don't think he's a priority pickup by any means, but it's going to be Jayden Higgins for the Houston Texans, only rostered in about 34% of leagues at the moment, and he just really hasn't been utilized to the best of his ability in this offense so far this year. Obviously, CJ Stroud hasn't played well this year either, but he went 1 for 1 for 24 yards and a touchdown this week. I just think this is a player who, sooner or later, the time is going to come. They used high enough draft capital on him, and he has a decent enough opportunity in this offense with very limited competition that's established. Maybe Christian Kirk is a little bit more established because he's a veteran presence in that slot, and Nico Collins obviously on the outside, but that number 2 job should be Jayden Higgins. So if they can start taking a step forward maybe over the next couple of months, Jayden Higgins is a player that I do expect to kind of grow as a player. But like I said, not a priority stash by any means, just a player to keep your eye on, and if you have an extra roster spot, maybe just pick him up and put him on the back end of your bench. So there you guys have it. There's some players that I'm looking at adding onto my fantasy football teams as we head into week 5 of the NFL season. Obviously, I gave you the 10 that are below that 50% threshold and about 10 more that are above that 50% threshold that you can be looking for. So hopefully there is somebody here in today's video that you guys can go add to your fantasy football teams. If there is, do me the favor, hit the like button. It is the best free way to show this channel some support. Also, make sure you guys are subscribed to this channel. You don't want to miss any of the future content that we got coming out later in the week. And last but not least, make sure to go join our free Discord. We do have a free Discord linked in the description, helping you guys with those fantasy football teams 24/7, 365. But with all of that being said, I have nothing else for you guys today. So I will see you on our next episode. But until then, peace out.